Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Atlantic Bushcraft Adventures. Tonight we are on episode 216, and we thought we'd talk a little bit about the vehicles of bushcraft. And this was kind of a joint effort on this one. Ben had thought of it last week, and then we kind of had to discuss about it because we had great aspirations last week, and then for some reason we blanked a little bit this morning. Not terrible, but a little bit. So not sure if this covers exactly what we were going to talk about last week when we thought up this idea or not, but we do have a better plan coming into it now that we've chatted about it a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So, to tell you the truth, it seems like a long time ago since last week. So.
Oh man, time passes so fast, but then it seems so long ago. Like it's a complete oxymoron.
Yeah. But I guess the influence for this one is our last conversation. We sort of talked about different ways to get out into the woods as opposed to different places or ways to find places out there. And as we said briefly, and we didn't talk for long, I just got home, we've between us covered quite a lot of options. So I suggested earlier, and I think we can probably stick with it. Let's just start with some of the most low-tech methods. And I mean, one of the things that comes to mind, of course, I mean, and I'm going to throw this one here, it's not even a vehicle per se, but like horseback. I mean, I think that's probably one of the most ancient forms. You know, horseback or a mule carrying your load. Like,
I've never had the old mule carrying the package and whatnot, but I have done horse camping. I was quite young. Don't get me wrong. This was back when my grandparents, they still had their horses and stuff like that. And it was pretty common for my cousin, Christopher. We'd hop on these horses and we'd disappear off hunting rabbits or whatever for the weekend. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I think of horses like cowboys and stuff. You distracted there, buddy?
I'm trying to figure out what Mel is trying to dig out of my office closet. She just kind of snuck in, opened the door, didn't say anything, and just started rooting around. And I'm like, what are you after? Anyway, sorry.
Robbing you of your treasures, that's all. Yeah, so I think of like the horseback trips, and you get the cowboy roll and stuff like that. I mean, it's a pretty traditional, old-fashioned way of exploring, especially North America early on. Maybe more so in the southern part in the States than it was up in Canada. It wasn't as prevalent in Canada, but it definitely happened up here too in areas.
And there's a lot of advantages to going camping on horseback if this is one of your things. It's companionship if you do go out by yourself. That is also kind of a con at the same time. You have something else that's solely dependent on you, so you have to allow for that. But I think a lot of times the benefits outweigh that. The companionship is nice. You're not as lonely out there, even though, it's a horse. It's much like taking your dog. It's just somebody else you can kind of bounce your thoughts off, even if they don't talk back. And all animals have a good personality. And of course, as you said there with the mule and stuff, it helps you carry a significant amount of gear. Now, depending on the horse you have, your skills and all of that stuff, it's going to dictate how much you can take and where you can go. And I guess, real quickly, some of the cons of a horse, as we said, you do have an animal you have to take care of. They can be limited by terrain. And of course, just the sheer cost of owning or renting one. Back in, my childhood days, everybody had horses. It was just the thing where I was from, you know what I mean? But nowadays, to own a horse, it's a big financial investment.
Yeah, I happen to know a few people who have horses and raised horses, and I think it's an awesome thing. And I was actually surprised how cheap you can get a horse. But then they told me everything that comes with it, like you have to have a barn and
it's not the cost of the horse that gets you, Ben.
Yeah. Horses are comparably cheap. It's the price after you get them, right? It doesn't get better. But yeah, I mean, some other advantages are I've heard of people who've been injured while on a horse and the horse just brought them home. Like it will return home with you on it. If you passed out on top of a horse, as long as you didn't fall off, it could bring you home. Like it'll also protect you from some predators.
Yeah.
Or at least warn you, right?
No, I was just going to say, and that was a big draw to some of the donkeys with prospectors, right? They would they would drive off a lot of things like coyotes and small wolves and things like that, right? Like a lot of people will still get a donkey or a mule and have that as part of their herd simply for a little bit of flock protection.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, I've heard of that in different farms and stuff. Um, so yeah, but I mean, I wanted to start with that because I think that was kind of a traditional one, and another traditional one. I mean, I think they called them the pioneers here, but some of the first people to explore Canada was canoe. I mean, it's a very Canadian thing, right? But
And
it was.
by
Good.
far, I mean, like you said, here in Canada, it was a major thing, and we generally had like the hollowed out canoes or birch bark canoes, which were, I think, not a historian, but I think, if memory serves me and school serves me right, was very common in the East Coast here. I'm not sure about your coast. I mean, you know what I mean, but it was very prominent in Canada in general. Just before we bounce on, I see two questions from Chris there. I'll try and answer really quickly. Chris, curious about the horseback riding. Is it true horses can't lose their balance and fall off the side of a cliff? I was told this a long time ago during a burro trip in Utah. So a horse, they are very sturdy on their feet, but they can lose balance. And somebody out there that still owns horses and is a lot more involved in that, please weigh in on this. I am not an expert by any degree of this, but I do know, like, from my experience, I've had horses stumble quite a bit. It's very difficult to get them to fall over, though not impossible, but they can stumble, and that could potentially heave you off or some of your gear and stuff like that. I've had that happen when I used to help run a small team that pulled logs out. Sometimes they would step on something and they would stumble quite a bit and it would screw up the pulling. And when we used to take them out horseback riding, if they, a stump or something like that can trip them up and they can stumble pretty bad. And like I said, I have seen them fall over, but it could have been the horse. You know what I mean?
I think it is important to know, and I'm not a horse expert by any means, but I can reasonably think about it. If you're loading a horse down, it is an encumbrance, no different than putting a backpack on yourself. Like, it will affect their ability to balance and move around the train. And I'm sure they can go through areas without somebody on their back that they would struggle a bit more with someone on their back. They're carrying some extra weight. It changes their balance. It'll have some effect. Same with pack animals or anything you do. Like, if I put a backpack on my dog, it's not quite as agile or capable as it was without one. And sometimes they don't pay attention and they get snagged on the pack because it's now wider, higher than they're used to.
And the last question that came up here, it was actually from Danny. Not really a question, it was a statement. He said, not sure if his back could handle a horse. That's another thing with a horse. There is a proper way to ride, and it's called posting. If you can figure out the whole posting thing, it'll save your back a lot. And if anybody doesn't know what posting is, the very simplified version of this is, as the horse bounces up and down, you kind of use your legs to change the momentum of your body, so you're not hitting with every up and down. You're only touching every third or fourth one, depending on how you post. And anyway, it's a whole thing. It's a whole other thing about learning to ride a horse. And I guess that's the bottom line when it comes to horses. If you are interested in doing camping with horses, very rewarding. It's very in-depth. Don't just think you're going to go rent a horse, even if somebody did rent you a horse without verifying your background or any of this. It's not as easy as just getting on and riding, even if it's a super good horse and it has good direction and all that stuff and super gentle. It still takes some skill from the rider going into that so that you're not basically abusing your own and the horse's body during your trip, if that makes any kind of sense.
It makes a lot of sense to me. I could draw parallels to some other methods like motorcycle riding and stuff too, right? Like there's, and we're going to get to that. We were talking a bit about canoes.
Canoes, yes.
If we throw canoes in there, I think we can capture a few with this one because this could be a long episode, to be honest. Canoes, kayaks, sups, or any type of boat. But canoes, kayaks, and sups I'm going to stick mainly to because they're portageable. We can pick them up and carry them. They each have advantages and disadvantages. We talked briefly about them, but The great thing about those is you can use them to get up and down waterways, across lakes, and often places that there isn't a good rail, road, or trail to any other way. So you can get to some pretty cool spots with these types of boats, and you can move them from one body of water to the next, and they can carry a lot. Like, I know people who went moose hunting, so they took everything they needed for moose hunting, got a moose, and got back with the moose.
In a good canoe.
So in a good canoe, like you get like a 17, 18-foot canoe it's slightly wider. It's not gonna You're not gonna win any races with this thing, but you can throw a good load on these things easily, right? And take your time. And it's an amazing way. It's one of my favorite ways to explore the wilderness is on a good, portageable watercraft.
And the great thing about boats, especially right now in this time in history, not speaking the history of these things, but they're fairly inexpensive. And I say that as a relative issue. You know what I mean? They're relatively inexpensive than if you were going to go and buy, say, a vehicle dedicated to bushcrafting. If you were going to buy a motorcycle, ATV, a car, a truck, or whatever. You can find a decent boat somewhere between $100 and $1,000. You know what I mean? And you can pay a lot more, and you can look secondhand. Like, there is a ton of options out there, but relatively speaking, they're fairly inexpensive. The only real drawback is you have to know how to operate one to some degree. Not that you can't learn, but there is, some getting in and out of it, and depending on the watercraft that you get, especially if it's a kayak, like a sit-in kayak, you may want to try learning some of the things about how to flip them over while you're still in them and stuff like that. Not that it's necessary, but there is skills that go into any of these methods that we're going to talk about that are going to be pretty unique to the method, that realize you're going to have to invest the time into to get good at. You know what I mean? You can watch your YouTube videos and read your books and stuff, but it's still going to take you doing the action to really develop the skill to operate whatever we're talking about here tonight.
There is 100%. There's skills and there's safety equipment involved. So that does kind of add to your loads and stuff, and it's generally been worth it. You've gone in canoes with me before. I think you got to try some of my kayaks.
Yep.
So I mean, like they're a lot of fun. I also have had a sup for a while. I now have multiple sups because honestly, the beauty of that is they're compact. They're inflatable. Once they're blown up, they're pretty solid. I've never found they had overmount flex or any issues, and I can get 3 or 4 in the back of the van and still carry my kids around. So I could only ever move up to 2 canoes or kayaks easily on my vehicles without involving a trailer. I do know some people who managed to get 3 up on top, but you got a lot of weight on your roof for that. So the downside to them, I think, is generally you do need some kind of transportation to move them to wherever you're going to camp. But still, once you get there, they're definitely getting you further back.
Yeah, for sure. And I was trying to, you'll know this one, Ben, because I can't think of the name of it off the top of my head. I was just telling Chris there, Chris was talking about canoes, and I mentioned that my canoe is a 16-foot. I think it weighs somewhere between 55 and 60 pounds. It's not that heavy. And I got it for like $350 secondhand. That was a Coleman? Wasn't it a Coleman canoe? There's no markings on it now, but I did show you pictures of it.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Could be a Coleman. I mean, yours is plastic?
Yeah, and that's the thing I was going to say, Chris, is realize my canoe has like an aluminum steel frame that runs down it and kind of up it, and then it's just a soft plastic on the outside of it. So there is a lot of flex to it. It's not like a rigid canoe. It's what I call a soft belly canoe. I assume they have some sort of real name, but I don't know what it is.
Yeah. There's as many designs of canoes and kayaks and that as you can imagine. It is important to understand their capabilities and purpose. There are ones that are kind of like recreational, multi-use. There's ones that are designed mainly for ocean. There's ones that are designed mainly for fast water. And there's ones that are meant for flat water. Ones that are better for camping. Some are more maneuverable, some track straighter. They all have their advantages and disadvantages. and you hit the nail on the head with the skill. But yeah, I mean, I had a couple of fiberglass ones. I think they sit ballpark the same weight as yours. Um, you know, it you do have to be in somewhat decent shape to portage a decent sized canoe. You can get really expensive Kevlar, carbon fiber, higher end ones that can weigh like 25, 35 pounds. But even then, it's a big, bulky object. It takes a little bit of effort to get it up in place. It's not just the weight, it's the size. And anyone who doesn't know what I'm talking about, try to pick up a big object that doesn't weigh a lot. You know,
Yeah, it's
try
very
pick.
awkward.
Yeah,
And to that point, and Steve's point here, I guess some things to know about any real watercraft if you're going to be portaging with it, and Ben can clarify a lot more of this for me, but I think he'll understand where I'm going, is there's a couple things you should know about a watercraft before, go purchase one or get into one or something like that. Generally, the longer and wider, the more stable it is going to be in the water. However, also, the heavier that sucker's going to be if you're going to go anywhere. So you got to kind of balance, and this is the great debate, honestly, and there's lots of topics on this. You can go check them out. What is the perfect size canoe? And the two things you got to keep in mind for that is it going to be for just you, or are you going to be going with somebody else? And what
yeah,
kind of water are you going on? Because not only do you have to look at the size of it for stability and stuff like that, is it the keel? And I'm really depending on you here, Ben, because I'm new to watercrafts.
yeah.
The thing that runs underneath.
I think so. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so the keel, depending on how deep or shallow that is, will also dictate how well it tracks in the water, how straight it goes. But the deeper it goes in, the straighter it will go, however, the less water you can get into. So rougher water ones tend to have a deeper keel, so that'd be your ocean ones and stuff like that, as where ones with less of a keel would be for more like rivers and things like that, because you want to sit shallow. But once
Yeah.
again, the smaller your keel or the higher it sits in the water, the more twitchy it is. So you take one paddle stroke and you could turn the entire front end in a different direction. All things that are fun to learn as you are getting out there in boats. And stuff that I learned firsthand just by going, oh, it's a canoe. I can figure this out. Hop in one and start paddling, and I'm going in circles in the lake. And I mean, it's fun. It's a great learning experience, but all general things to keep in mind when you're looking for watercrafts.
Yeah. So the big thing is if you're soloing a canoe, or you'll see it with a kayak, is the more centrally you can sit, the more control you're going to have. If you sit in the back of a canoe and the weather's really calm and you know what you're doing, you can really do a lot of good, and especially if there's enough weight to keep it down. If it's not weighed right and the front end is sitting up high and you get the slightest of breeze, it is a lot of work to get that thing to go straight. It is shockingly hard, and in fact, it's almost impossible to get it to go into the wind in that situation. I've been known, and I do this quite a bit, to sit backwards on the front seat in my canoes, my 16 foots, and use a kayak paddle. So I kind of get the best of both worlds with that. The kayak paddle allows me to paddle both sides. I find I can get a little bit more speed, a little bit more maneuverability out of it. But when I want to do something really detailed, so if I'm I'll flip my canoe paddle out and I'll just finesse it where I want it. So I'll use both types of paddles. But I think it is one of my favorite ways to explore, simply because I can take a little bit extra gear, and it can be a lot of work. Steve can vouch for me on this. If you're doing a whole bunch of portaging and you're in and out a lot, you're now dragging a 70-pound canoe plus your 70 plus pounds of gear because, well, you're canoeing most of it, right? You're going to take a bit of extra gear, and we all do it. Like this is nothing aimed at anyone. If anyone's listening to this and think I'm talking about them, no, I'm talking about me and everyone else I've ever gone with. When I kayak or canoe, I take way more gear.
Oh, yeah.
Do I need to? No, but I do. And it usually means that sometimes we have to do a second or even a third portage, depending on the situation. But on the flip side, you can get carts. And if the trails aren't too bad, you can pull it with a cart. To the wise, if you don't know what the state of the trails are, that cart may just be an extra thing you're dragging back for.
And carts do allow you to take a lot of extra gear and a lot of effort off your body when it's flat.
Well, I mean, I went to Keji one time. I think Chris was with me, and we had friends with us. And one of the spots we came out of, it was like blueberry bushes, and it was like 4 foot high and a solid wall. Like you knew that was the trail, and it was probably about 6 inch wide trail. Like you could get 1 foot right in front of you, and we're pulling canoes up through this stuff, and it's like we tried putting the cart on it, and it got tangled up in the bushes. It was more work than and some of the people ended up dragging it through the woods. We carried some of them. We team carried, so some at the front and some in the back. Like it was a lot of effort. So it can be, but then when you get back in the water, it's a lot of ease. So take it with what it is, but it's definitely a great way to get the spots that you'll never see. And exploring the sides of lakes, you find really neat camping spots. I highly recommend it, both in places like Keji and what's the big one in the States, or not in the States, in the Ontario that everyone talks about. I want to say no. It starts with an A.
Don't know, man.
Ontario, but just as much. Like if you can find like parks with enough public land around, you can hidden little coves and stuff. I got to look that park up.
Algonquin. There you go.
Algonquin.
Thank you, Steve. Much appreciated, sir. I knew the one you were looking for, man, but I wasn't even going to take a shot at it, so don't give the dyslexic words like that unless they're literally in front of them.
That's Winnipeg. But yeah, there's rivers and stuff. Like I watched a podcast, listened to a podcast, I guess more precisely. Guys who went from like Minnesota right up to Hudson Bay, and amazing tales. So you can cover massive amounts of terrain with these boats.
And there's something about being on the water that's more peaceful, or peaceful in a different way than walking through the woods. It's even more quiet because when you're walking through the woods, you still get the crackling of leaves and sticks and stuff like that. And if you trip and you're sweating and blah, 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 blah. On the water, if you get a nice day and the lake is smooth, it is like gliding on glass.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and all you hear is your paddle and the odd bird or light breeze, and you can get like these amazing views across the water and the reflections. In fact, not a word of a lie, if you were to see my screenshot saver right now, or my background on my screen, it is a picture of Keji. I think my brother took it with my kayak and my gear all strapped to it. And it was a great trip that we had done one Thanksgiving. So that is a good method. We could talk all day, and I'm going to call an end to this right on watercraft. But anyone wants more on that, like, yes, we can definitely.
So just before we move off watercraft, one thing here, Danny's asking, I would consider a paddle kayak. What's people's thoughts on them? I know the ones you're talking about. I've never had any experience with them. Gary might be a good feller to ask on that. And we can definitely relay that on to him. He would be a guy to tell you all about kayaks.
I did get to use Gary's once. His was the pedal one, you mean?
Yep.
His was the one with like the propeller on it. And I know there's another company, I can't remember the name, and it had like a set of fins, and the fins would move in weird and interesting ways. And I knew a guy, Ryan Anderson. I think he's a pretty good fisherman in Nova Scotia. He had a YouTube channel on him for a while. Beauty of those is you can pretty well paddle around hands-free, which if you're into fishing and stuff can be really good. And it lets you use your legs, where if your legs are stronger than your arms. That being said, in shallow water, those things are going to bring up much earlier. And you can unhook them. You're still going to need your paddle for certain spaces. So you can unhook it. I think a lot of them have like a quick release. If it hits, they'll pop up into the boat rather than break. I think actually Gary actually snapped the plastic clip off on his. He had to get it replaced of one of the ones he had at one point. So Um, Good method has its drawbacks too. That mechanism alone is like 20, 25 pounds.
Yeah.
You can also get them that are battery powered, but again, you're looking at another 10, 15 pounds for the battery, if not more, which is going to limit your range to whatever that battery is capable of. And if you're planning on portaging it, now you're dragging the mechanism plus, because a paddle weighs like a pound or two. Like they're not that heavy. You can get carbon fiber ones, and you know those pedal drives are significantly heavier and bulky. They take up room. If you're not planning on portaging, I highly recommend it. If you're planning on fishing in different areas, it's really handy to free your hands up. For camping with portages, I might tend to lean away from that. And I think some boats you can actually just remove it for trips like that and just reinstall it on the trips you want to use. So that's definitely a good option. You can get, since we're talking about it, you can get battery driven options too for both canoe, kayak.
Yep. And Chris
The
was
trolling
mentioning one of
motor
those
style
too.
things.
Lightweight canoe with a trolling motor. And honestly, I threw a trolling motor on my canoe, and in, once again, flat water, man, that thing goes like greased lightning. It's great.
I was at the boat shows and some of the outdoor shows here in Vancouver, and there's actually a company, and they have it. It basically goes on where the fin is on a lot of sups, and the thing isn't very big, and the little battery pack isn't that big, and I think they say you can go for like 2 to 3 hours on a charge, and it'll get you going like I don't know 7, 15 kilometers an hour. Like it's paddle or faster speed. Really neat. Um, it could be an option, right? Those sups are not heavy, so there is options there. With sups, you have no gunnel; like it basically sits a couple inches over the water, but you can still take whatever the load limit is. And there's bungee cords; you can strap stuff down, similar to kayaks. And with canoes, you have like all the inside. There's plenty of ways to deck them out. Like I said, we could talk for hours.
I was
I
going to say,
wanted to
that's
move.
almost a whole other episode we could talk about boating in
Yeah,
general. I know we've done boating episodes, but
yeah.
we could still do another one.
Gladly. I mean, it's definitely a passion of mine. But we're going to hit a lot of my passions today, so why stop? Um, I
Well, you
want to
mentioned it.
talk
Oh,
about one
sorry.
thing, but I was just going to throw this one out there. Different types of carts and wagons. Um, there was a backpack idea there for a while. It had a set of wheels, and you just hook it over your waist, and it would follow you behind. It takes most of the weight off your body. Something like that, or a wagon you can pull. I've used them at the beach or going down better groomed trails where you want to pull a fair amount of weight and not put a lot of effort into it. Works good on trails. The thing to remember with both these things is if the trails are narrow or really bad, like you're basically rock climbing, it's a lot of work with those. So I just wanted to mention those as sort of another uh, low tech solution to moving more gear into the woods.
And I guess hand in hand with that would be a sled in the wintertime, which you've done yourself, and it works
Yes,
great.
yes. Try to know that it is going to go down hills faster than you. So if you're going downhill, either
Watch your
you let it
heels.
lead or you need a stiffer handle. It'll push you down a hill if you're not careful. But yeah, no, that's how I do my winter camping. Load my stove, my tent, a lot of my gear. Sometimes I'll still wear a pack. I can throw my snowshoes on there, and if the snow gets deep, I'll throw them on. Snowshoes do make it slightly more difficult to walk, but a hell of a lot easier in deep snow. So, you know, weather and conditions appropriate. But yeah, pulling something like that, they definitely go hand in hand. Um, Continuing on, did you want to throw
Nope.
something out? Or
You hit everything that I was going to say on trailers. They're just
yeah.
good to go. Keep on trucking. We got a lot to cover.
I wanted to bring up bicycles, both mainly like paddle driven, but you can get e-bikes now, and that's going to merge, I guess, into our next series. But yeah, bicycles. Mountain bikes were really popular when me and you were younger. Now they have the fat tire bikes, which
And I've never got to
are
try
like
one of those, and I'd love to, honestly.
I kind of did like sort of a hybrid between mountain bike and fat tire ones. My brother had a little electric one, and I was playing with that. But you can get the really fat tire ones. And like you, I haven't really tried them out, but I'm sure they would be much better on softer sand, snow, things like that. I was really intrigued by them, and I looked into them. You can buy little trailers that you can tow behind boats and stuff, or bikes and stuff. So I really like that concept. Um, Drawbacks to me, and I want to talk about drawbacks, why I didn't get into it. And anyone who can overcome these, more power to you. I have a ton of respect. To me, they are expensive for what they are. You can pay 3 to 5 grand easy, two plus for like an e-bike that's like entry level. You want a higher end one, or even a paddle bike on the high end, you're looking at 1,500
Oh
plus.
yeah. I mean,
Um,
my daughter's bike, Lily. I just bought her one last Easter, and it's a kid's
yeah,
bike. It was 300 and some bucks.
yeah. Uh, Bikes seemed to me to be cheaper when I was growing up. I don't know. Like you could usually pick them up. Now there's been a lot of technology into them. I think they have better gearing. The shifters are much smoother, but that came at a price tag. Tires are pretty neat. And I think in some ways they've just kind of, the days of like the single gear, right? It's gone, but yeah, no, it can get you a lot of places. It's super quiet. You can, like I said, you can get panniers and stuff on them. You can carry a fair amount of gear, more than you would really want to on your back if you wanted to.
Yeah, you
You
can
have
get
to be
bags for these things that'll put the gear over both
right
the
over.
front axle and the rear axle. I've seen them. I've seen people going down the road in these things literally loaded up. It looked like a ball going down the road on two wheels, and they were just going for it.
Yeah, no, and I mean, like even like within the cities and stuff, like there's bike lanes now, and parks will allow you to take bikes in when you can't take anything else. Like non-motorized vehicles kind of get like a little bit of an advantage in a lot of environments. And even though like technically I think legally you can't drive a bicycle down a sidewalk, people seem to do it and get away with it all the time. So you have the rules of the road, but you kind of get like a pass for a lot of stuff. So it really gives you a flexibility that's second to none, in my opinion.
And you can cover a
Um,
lot of ground on a bicycle in the run of a day, and most places you don't need a license to operate one. You know what I mean?
so
So,
somebody who's good on a bicycle can cover a lot of ground on a bicycle.
good point.
Somebody who's not drove a bicycle for 30 plus years, I'm going to tell you, you can't go that far. If you think you haven't drove a bike in many, many years and you're going to go out and jump on that and throw a back on it and go up a hill, you are going to be shocked at how out of shape you may be. Now, if you're not, more power to you. I was pretty shocked at how hard it was for me to ride a bicycle. I thought I'd be able to pick it up really quickly. And yes, I can stay stable and I can move and I can get it going at a good speed. But I have to rebuild those muscles. I can walk for miles. I can portage for miles. I can do a lot of things. I bicycled around my neighborhood a few years ago. I bought a cheap mountain bike, and I suffered trying to get to go any distances on that thing. Um, so
My big drawback on bicycles was always the seat. Being a heavier set fellow, it was wearing the bike rather than riding the bike. So you can get better seats to overcome this and things like that. But back in my day, they were not common to get a better seat. You
well,
got
and I've
the little wedge.
even heard that like there are some negative health effects of sitting on a bicycle seat. Like
I would
it
imagine
puts
that.
it puts a lot of pressure on some pretty vital parts of the male and female anatomy, and it can have some pretty negative effects. So definitely make sure you set them up right. Definitely know you know how to use it right, because you can injure yourself on a bicycle. And the safety equipment, like we said with the watercraft, it's really important. The helmets, um, things like that. The right shoes and pants make a huge difference. I spend a lot of time talking to cyclists and why they love it, and I've always wanted to love them more, um, but I do find like it's just not my thing. And the thing is, when I look at them, and then I look just next door, and I can get a motorcycle.
And that's actually a great segue into the next vehicle, to be honest
so,
with you.
so a huge passion for me and you. I mean, there's no knocking it. Motorcycles take a huge part in your life. I think I can say that without lying. Can I not?
Oh, for sure. I mean, I'm a motorcycle instructor. I've been doing it for going on 7 years now.
Right. I've been driving motorcycles since I was 16, 17. I have had a love of them since I was much younger. My father had motorcycles. My grandfather had motorcycles. My great grandfather had motorcycles. Like
I learned to ride a motorcycle before I had the training wheels off my pedal bike by like a year.
So you beat me, but what I'm saying is motorized vehicles have been a part of our lives. I drove three-wheelers for much longer. Like I've been driving three-wheelers since I was basically capable of pushing throttle. And I love them. And that's something sort of in there, and we'll talk about them all together. But yes, a motorized, all-terrain, off-road, on-road vehicle, they are not quite as versatile as a bicycle, but the advantage is, A, you can do highway speeds. So
Yeah.
you can cover massive, massive amounts of ground in minimal amount of time. Do not, and I don't know if I can emphasize this enough. You are a motorcycle instructor. You're probably a better rider than me, but do not think you can jump on a motorcycle having never done it, no experience, and take some heavy trails or even get around town safely.
And the other thing I'm going to say, because I see this a lot, if you're a great street rider, don't assume you're a great dirt rider. It's two different types of things. Like, I've had the privilege or spoiledness, whatever you want to call it. I've ridden almost any kind of motorcycle sport that you can imagine. I've ridden track, I've ridden trail, I've ridden trials, cruisers, crotch rocket. You name it, I've done it at some point. And I can tell you that dirt bike riders don't necessarily make good street bike riders, and street bike riders definitely don't make good dirt bike riders until they train the different skills. Riding dirt, significantly different than riding street. And this is, I do hear a lot of people with this, especially in the courses, people that are coming in, they've been riding for a while, might have their license, stepped away from it, and they just want to refresh their skills. And, oh yeah, I'm coming in and refreshing my skills. I'm going to go, ride the Dakar, for instance. And I'm like, these are not the skills you want to refresh to go ride the Dakar or go through the backwoods. You need to go train those skills. It's different. So if you do have experience with one type of motorcycle, realize that you will have to get some experience and training with the other riding style. And as simple as if you rode your dirt bike down dirt roads and trails and stuff like that, like good trails, that is still not the same as riding it through rough trails and uneven terrain. You use muscles you did not know existed. Everything hurts, including your frickin' eyelids at the end of the day if you're not used to it.
I think we will spend a few minutes on this topic because I can't help it. But yeah, so just for comparison, like I said, you've known me. I've owned a motorcycle most of the time I've ever known you, probably much longer than I've known you, and you know that I've been an avid motorcyclist and driving to and from work, down in my cabin. I've been your way. We went camping one time on when we drove down some pretty serious dirt road that I would have questioned taking a car or truck up.
Well, and we've said this before, that road we went down, I don't know how either of us made it out with our tires intact. But anyway.
So, I would argue that we have some skills there. That being said, I went and got recently another motorcycle. I'm very excited for it. One of the things I got my wife to do, I said, go down to the dollar store and pick up some pilots. Those things are going to go in the saddlebags, and I'm going to go practice. I'm going to practice maneuvering that bike. When I drive to work, and I drive to work almost every day on it now, I'm driving down the road. If there's no one else on the road, I'm practicing my turns. I take up all my lane, right? Like I want to see how is it going to react if I do this. Like I'm constantly testing this thing to figure out what it's going to do and how it's going to react because no two bikes I've ever been on have reacted 100% the same. They don't.
And that's the other big thing people need to learn. Just because you've driven your bike does not mean the next bike will handle the same way.
Yeah. My Vulcan was low and wide and very stable in its speed. Like it just, it's a great cruiser bike. This bike is more of an adventure bike. So it's much higher. It's a little bit less stable. It's much more fun. But it's definitely going to test my skills. And I'm much more comfortable on it this week than I was last week. And I hope that continues. I also went out and bought all the gear. So I had the jacket with the arm, you know, the elbow pads, the shoulder pads, the back pads. I bought the pants with the hip pads and the knee pads. And I bought the motorcycle boots that have like all the protection on it, because I figure if I have the gear, I probably won't fall, but if I don't have the gear, I'm definitely going to fall and break something.
Another great quote I use from my course, and I'm not plugging my course here, but something that works is get the gear, wear the gear. The most common reason for not wearing gear, it was hot. The second most common reason is I couldn't afford it, which I understand, but for the second part, you're putting a price on your life, potentially. And for the first part, you show me the shower that washes off road rash. I can show you a shower that washes off sweat. Never found one that washes off road rash. And I've had bad road rash. Like, I've had 2, for sure, major accidents on motorcycles. And it's not good. Both of which when I was younger, a little more foolish. Probably not wearing all the gear I was supposed to. And I can tell you, get the gear, wear the gear.
I 100% agree with you. I started driving on a little CDX 250, which, if anyone knows, is not an off-road bike. Although it has the same motor as an off-road. And that's about all it had that resembled an off-road bike. And I was driving around with her gloves. And I crashed that bike. And I pushed my fist into the dirt. And when I came back, there wasn't hardly any skin on the back of my hands. Do you know what I will not do now?
Ride without gloves.
Well, I will not do it. It doesn't even feel right. Like every now and then, like I'll have to move it in the driveway or move it, and it feels wrong. Like I kind of want to just go find my gloves. So like, I know I'm just not moving it like 10 feet. Let's get the gloves.
Dude, if I'm not wearing bare minimum boots that cover the ankle, sturdy pants, gloves, and a helmet, I can sometimes get away without a coat if I'm just moving it, around my driveway or in my lawn or something like that. But bare minimum that, I don't feel safe. I don't feel comfortable on the bike. And yet I'll ride down the road and see somebody go past me with flip-flops, shorts, and a tank top on, wearing like this beanie helmet on a crotch rocket where he is literally positioned to be, or she, whoever, posed to be a human meat missile if anything ever goes wrong. It is...
This is horrible. I'm going to say it, and anyone wants to tear me up for this. It always hurts me to watch, especially young people. You see the girls like in bikinis or guys in like a muscle shirt and shorts. And like you said, just zipping around, like no gear. And it's like, have you ever fallen? Like, you are never going to look the same again. And like beautiful young women in a bikini, like, you're gorgeous. Wear the gear. Right?
Save the body, honestly.
Even if you don't think you're gorgeous, you're not going to look better.
No. I've been to enough motor vehicle incidents that involved motorcycles to tell you, wear the gear, it does make a difference. Massive difference.
I mean, I didn't buy the most high-end gear out there, but just to plug something that I've been pretty happy with since I bought. I went on Amazon, I bought HWK, Hawk, I think is their sort of more formal name, gear. This gear is like less than $100 for the pants, less than $100 or $100 approximately for the jacket. I think I paid like $250 taxes all in. They ended up reimbursing me the shipping cost, so I got $40 back on that this week. That gear has ventilation on the arms, on the shoulders, across the back. The pants have ventilation. I can feel it working. So on warm days, I can feel the air moving through. It didn't cost me a fortune, but it made me feel a hell of a lot better. And I watched the reviews. A lot of people are really liking this gear. So it is an option. You can pay for more. And I'm not saying it's not going to be better, because it'll probably fit better. It'll probably feel better. But even that entry-level gear will give you significantly more safety than a a jean jacket and regular pair of jeans. It's night and day the difference you're going to get. So keep that in mind. There are some neat things if you're into aesthetics and you don't want to look like it. There's a company that sells what looks like a plaid shirt with all the armor in it. Right?
The sky's the limit for options when it comes to gear.
Yeah. So you're still probably going to pay $200-300 for this jacket, but it'll look like you're not wearing a jacket. It'll look like you're wearing a heavy shirt. So if that's what makes you feel cool, but I do recommend the proper gear. Good riding gloves, good boots, solid jacket. I always wore chaps when I could. On like the hottest days of the year, my leather chaps did kind of make me feel like faint after a while. But then I would just wear like extra jeans or something with a bit of padding. But yeah, that was, and I always really knew that I was taking a huge risk with that.
And like Danny says here, even the bare minimum for the gear is bugs and flying rocks don't feel good when you get hit at speed.
Yeah, I mean, a good bumblebee to the skull will knock you out.
I don't know about to the skull, and I'm only going to give one story because we're kind of derailing here from our topic, but this is worth it. Racing a little bit, back straight, probably doing around 300 kilometers an hour. The zipper on my race suit was down a little bit because I was hot and I wanted some air to float in. Bee came in, hit me here, literally blew a hole in my t-shirt and peeled the skin away from me. Like, it was bad.
So, just going to throw this out there and then we can get away from motorcycles. Make sure you have, if you're going off-road, try to get the right tires. There is add-ons you can get to your bike, skid plates, the bark busters, the hand protectors, things like that. Protect the important things, especially your oil. Like your oil filter on a lot of these bikes is very visible, very easy to hit. Things like that. We can do probably an episode on how to set your bike up.
For sure.
Maybe we'll try to do that, not as a podcast, but we'll collaborate on that. We can't do it face to face, but I got a plan for that. But make sure it's set up right. Similar thing with dirt bikes, ATVs. These things are more set up for the off-road. Make sure you have the right gear. You probably won't fall off them the same, but trees, branches, twigs, and animals can really ruin your day.
Mm-hmm.
But man, you can carry a fair amount of gear and you can get to places that you wouldn't imagine getting with almost any other motorized vehicle. These things can get you crazy places.
And the only real drawback is the cost of them. The fact that you're bound by gas, generally some sort of propellant. You are no longer moving this thing. And
Insurance.
the skill involved. Yeah, literally.
Insurance is probably the biggest.
I keep that under cost.
Yeah, compared to like your paddle bike.
Yeah.
Even fuel is not all that expensive on these things. They're very fuel efficient for what they are. Yeah, I mean, if you want to get into some slightly more unique ones, you can start talking about, and I'll even consider side-by-sides in that same genre, but then you can get into like Argos and things like that.
Yep.
These things.
And once again, the limiting factors to a lot of these things, like ATV, side-by-sides, Argos, is going to be where you taking it. If you're going down trails and stuff like that, the trail you're on may not be indicative of the vehicle you're taking. Side-by-sides generally have a longer breakover or less breakover angle, whatever you want to call it. Their wheelbase is further apart, so like high humps will generally hang them up in the middle. And I know this from experience simply because my in-laws own, I think it's a Pioneer 500. It's the Honda version of my ATV. I got a Honda Foreman 500, and they got the 500 side-by-side version off it anyway. And my ATV will go places their side-by-side won't. Like, they'll get hung up. They're caught in branches. They're caught in breakover angles, stuff like that. However, they are way more comfortable while they're doing it.
I think the natural progression, though, like this is the one I've always debated, is side-by-sides are pretty cool. You can go off-road. My problem with them, with some exception, is they're not road legal. So you do need a truck or like these purely off-road vehicles to get to where you need to go. You generally need a trailer or a truck and to tow them. I've always debated, and we've talked about this before, the little tiny mini trucks from Japan,
Yep.
the high jets, things like that. I don't know, there's a bunch of names on them, but you can buy these things, import it for under 20 grand.
And they make off-road kits for these things, lifted with off-road tires. They're all-wheel drive. Man, they go a lot of places.
You have, they're all-wheel drive. They're running similar size engines, but they're road legal. They oftentimes have things like air conditioning. Some of them have like tilt boxes, and I've seen them with like the whole, like the box can raise like on a boom type thing, or scissor lift.
Yep.
It'd be really neat for hunting. Easy to put a winch on. But you're also enclosed. So when you're driving around in the rain and mist and stuff, they got like proper wipers. No, nothing's coming in at you. And did I mention? And I'm sure I did. They're road legal. They're not high speed. Like going down the Trans-Canada Highway at 110, 120 is not going to happen.
No, I think they max out at like
just over 100, I think, and it's terrifying, I'm told.
Yeah, I've seen a couple of them floating around here, but seeing we're starting to talk about four-wheeled vehicles now, yeah, that's a great option because they're narrower than most other vehicles, and they can get a lot of places the other ones won't because of that all-wheel drive, short wheelbase, and they do make some, or used to anyway. I'm thinking like the old Suzuki Sidekicks and Samurais and stuff like that. They were great off-road vehicles if you could get over the way they looked. Personal opinion, no offense to anybody out there that owns ones. They're just unique looking, you will have to agree. But then you get into your cars and trucks, and I think that's the most common one for most people. And you know yourself, you have a Subaru there, which I guess is a station wagon, but it's cars, same thing. You can do these things up and have great adventures in them. I've seen people put Honda Civics or Honda Accords in places I would kind of be like, I don't know if I want to do that with my truck. So it comes down to the way the vehicle's set up and your skill with it. You know what I mean?
Here's the thing to keep in mind with your automobile. And I mean, this is what it is. Road legal automobiles. To buy them, you can go anywhere from like $1,000 for a used beater to 100,000 plus. You know what I mean? Like to buy now a full-size pickup truck with all-wheel drive and most of the accessories, you could be looking at easy 60 grand.
Oh, easy. My Ranger. I bought 2019 Ranger back when it was new. I just went to the Watt the other day to look at one just to see what the going rate was. So my new was 45,000 at the time. A new one now starts at 50, and a lot of the features that were standard on mine, you now have to pay for packages for. So I mean, they're just going up in price. I think an F-150 was like 80 grand to the one I was looking at. I'm just like, once this truck goes, I think I'm getting a horse and carriage again. Like,
it has gotten a lot. I bought the Colorado I bought brand new, off the lot. Nobody had ever really owned it before, type thing, so it was brand new. I think we paid 36 for that, and people thought it was crazy at that time. Yeah, like trucks have gone up a lot. They've pretty well doubled in the last 20 years. I can say that with ease. So it is a lot. But pick them up used, things like that. There's a lot of options. The beauty is, you're going to have the conveniences. You can carry more stuff. You have a reliability there that's second to none, really. Like,
I was going to say, the big thing that I love with a vehicle, it's a bailout option. If everything goes to hell with your setup, you can generally sleep in your vehicle. You may not be, fully stretched out and 5-star sleeping, but you're going to sleep dry and most likely warm if you had to start the car or truck or whatever case may be and run the heater a little bit, providing you don't have any exhaust leaks and, that it's safe, which I know could be a liberal term depending on if it's your bush vehicle or whatnot. Just a couple comments from the side here before they get passed up too much. Steve McDonald, buddy of ours, apparently he got his first tick on him ever today.
His chickens didn't protect him?
Apparently not. So I did ask him, was it a black-legged, or actually I asked if it was a deer tick or a dog tick, but black-legged tick or a brown-legged tick. And something else here, because it's a shout-out to somebody we often mention on the podcast, as Chris Loveless says, Jeremy, Lone Wolf. We've
Yeah.
mentioned him, inspired him to buy a Dodge Durango, and he's been slowly turning it into an actual camper vehicle. And that's the beauty of vehicles. You can actually turn them into what you want. Danny, who's in our comments here too, Red Sand Adventures, he's doing the same thing with a Toyota Tacoma. He's got a cap on it and doing it up real nice. Jeremy did it with his Durango. If you want to get creative, you can make some real nice setups. Me personally, if I was going to make a woods vehicle or a bushcrafting vehicle, I do like the option of SUV kind of design because it's already enclosed in. You don't have to worry about a cap. It's less pieces. It's already one solid unit. Depending, like if you can lay the seats down and throw a twin mattress in there, you basically have a mobile camper already, and you've done nothing other than lay the seats down and buy a mattress.
Flip on that though. If you have one of these full-size trucks, you can tow a trailer.
Yes, trucks do
Right?
have a benefit.
And I did for years. I had a pop-up trailer, 10-foot real light, I think it was, and I was able to take that almost anywhere. I love that vehicle. So between the truck, I had two trucks hooked up to that, maybe a third. I may have pulled it with the van too at some point. No, I didn't. I could have, but I didn't. So, but yeah, I had two trucks I pulled that thing with. I loved it. It got us amazing places. So yeah, you can, ultimate level of comfort is with your full size vehicle. Beyond that, I mean, we've covered a lot of stuff.
So just a quick blurb, because some people may be wondering about this. Somebody recently asked me about this. What is the difference between a truck and an SUV, other than, an SUV is closed in and a truck is not? Or more specifically, a rigid body truck versus a flex body truck, which is a new thing. We're starting to get a lot of Ford Mavericks and the Honda Ridgeline, which is called a solid body truck. It runs on a unibody frame. Much like your SUVs and stuff, it just means the body's attached, right, from front to back. Even if it has a frame, it's got a unibody on top of that, and it's all one piece. The downside of this is it doesn't have a lot of flex to rotate. So usually your hauling capacities are diminished. They don't quite have the off-road capabilities because they don't have that flex. Like if you're getting into real big rock crawling, and not saying you can't compensate for that with some, high-tech suspension, independent suspensions that move and traveling axles and stuff like that. But just off the showroom here, you're generally going to get a little less off-road capability. And some people will argue that, and they're free to. I'm not an expert, not a mechanic. But personally, unless they're an off-road vehicle like Jeeps and Broncos and stuff like that, they're made to kind of go off-road. They are solid body, but they're also short in their wheelbase. So what I'm talking about is a longer wheelbase.
You have to. For me, the difference between a truck and an SUV generally is the truck has a bed and the SUV doesn't. There is a lot more SUVs that are the unibody style. There are quite a few, especially in the past, that had a truck chassis.
Yep.
The Suburban would be a good example of that. And I mean, there are other ones. The old Broncos, I think, were full chassis. I mean, and those
full chassis, but still rigid frame. They didn't have the flexibility to it, so if you twisted them too much, you'd twist your body panels out of alignment.
Yeah. But I guess those body panels gave it some strength in itself.
Oh, for sure. I mean, most people that owned one of those didn't care if they got bent up a little bit.
But, I mean, they were solid vehicles. People took them everywhere. Like, they really were. I visited Lab City one time, and I mean, everyone seemed to be driving Suburbans. they were these big, rugged SUVs that you could carry the whole family, plus a couple of large dogs and maybe a small farm animal. They were huge, right? We used them for search and rescue. We always had a couple of those style vehicles, the full-size, full-chassis SUVs, for good reason. I mean, we often they had third-row seating. They could tow a ton, literally. Great vehicles, solid vehicles. If you're going to buy a vehicle for off-road, really look at it. I mean, Subaru now has come out with their wilderness packages. They are unibody, but they have beefed some things up. They've added some more underbody support and stuff. do realize that the modern vehicles oftentimes are not protected underneath as well. So sometimes you'll have to add that stuff
I
onto
was
them.
just going to say, skid plates is always a good idea, regardless of what your vehicle is. This includes motorcycles and ATVs. You can get skid plates. They're going to protect the important bits. So if you accidentally misjudge your, clearance level, it'll at
Yeah.
least take a hit. Some of them are only made to take one hit, and you kind of got to replace them. That's what a lot of the skid plates that come from factory are. Ford's notorious for this. I'm not picking on Ford, but they're generally thinner skid plates, and they'll take one good solid impact. But then generally they crumple, they absorb that, and then you kind of got to replace them. If you want to sink the money into it, you can get some aftermarket ones, or if you're knacky and you have a welder and a buddy that's good with machining, you can generally make a little heavier skid plates that will literally hold the weight of the vehicle. And I've seen people use these to their advantage when they're off roading. They'll literally bounce their vehicle over their skid plates.
Yeah. I mean, you get rock sliders and stuff you can add to them too. That's more of a solid bar that goes underneath your rocker guards and will actually allow you to slide along the rocks without hurting the body panels. And they mount to some solid spots underneath your vehicle. Um, but I kind of want to throw a few more things out. We've kind of up to our hour, and I want to hit a few things. We never mentioned snowmobiles, which we could have, but it's similar to your ATVs and stuff. And you can reinforce those too, by the way. We didn't also mention for anyone with maybe a few more dollars or a bit more adventurous, aircraft. Both helicopters, seaplanes, things like that can get you places that you wouldn't get with anything else we've mentioned here so far.
And that's for
Although,
sure.
yeah, although, most planes need a proper runway. The float planes will land on water, and you can put floats on a helicopter or land a helicopter in a pretty small field in the middle of nowhere.
And we're kind of laughing for us here. It's not common, but I do know in places in the U.S., there is several locations where it's almost as popular to own a personal helicopter, and we're talking like these ultralights, as it is for us to have a motorcycle up here. And I didn't realize this. I just watched kind of a documentary on this stuff. But I mean, the cost of them's not outrageous considering you're getting something that flies. And the ultralights and personal ones, the licensing for them is not as complicated as like getting one for an airliner, for instance. You know what I mean? So it became more realistic. We don't really have any dealerships here, nor do we have the weather to sustain owning a ultralight helicopter for the majority of the year. They don't like snow and stuff like that. Not that you can't fly them in it. Honestly, I don't have a clue. I assume you probably could. I just wouldn't want to. You know what I mean? So.
Well, yeah, there's a lot to consider with an aircraft because the maintenance is extremely important. The thing is, you get a flat tire, you pull over the side of the road, you call someone, and they'll come get you. I was looking around for motorcycle repair guys out here. They'll actually the one I'm going to go see a guy Friday, and he has a mobile repair service. He will drive to you and help you out. And I'm sure that comes with a cost. I don't know exactly what, but I'm going to have a chat with them about that. If you have like a helicopter rotor blade that breaks in flight, there's no pulling over with that thing, right? You can't you lose a wheel on a plane, like that's a problem.
What, you're saying there's no one that's going to meet you in the air to fix your landing gear? Like, and
Right?
little known fact, just because we're on this, I have never been on anything other than a two-seater fixed-wing airplane, but I've seen a lot of Eastern Canada from helicopter, which is weird. Most people are the other way. You know what I mean? It's just
I I have spent more hours than almost anyone else I know, with a few exceptions, on a helicopter who's never left the ground in a helicopter. I've never been in a flying helicopter. But I have spent time in running helicopters and many, many, many hours on ones just sitting on the ground. Right? I know people spent more time in helicopters, but all of them have flown.
I have no doubt you kill me in hours, but it's kind of nice to know I've flown more than you.
So, but I mean, they're an amazing thing. There's a reason air flight is one of the safest, is because there's some pretty stringent rules on how to maintain them and stuff like that. Really, it's something that could be practiced with every method we've talked about. Proper maintenance on your gear is essential. I don't care if it's your paddle bike, your canoe, your motorcycle, any of these things. You are trusting your life to something mechanical. Put some time and effort into making sure it's in good shape.
Yeah, and honestly, even the simple maintenance like oil changes goes a long way. You don't want to be out in the back 40 and that's when you decide, that oil pan that you've been neglecting that had a few pinholes in it and it was just dripping oil, a couple weeks ago, but I'm sure it'll make it for this trip, and you realize that the oil leak got worse and it ran out and your engine seizes. That's not where you want that to happen. And the reason I mention this story is because I so hope the person's listening. If not, I'm going to be sending them this episode. I know this exactly happened to somebody, and I had to go bail them out.
So I think we've covered a ton of ways you can explore the wilderness. We've mentioned animals. We've mentioned self-powered devices like canoes, paddle bikes, kayaks, SUPs, rowboats.
Pulling a trailer by your own.
Yeah. We've mentioned motorized vehicles from ATVs to dirt bikes to motorcycles. Sort of hybrid things like those little mini trucks and side-by-sides. We've mentioned cars, trucks, automobiles. There are some bigger things. We didn't mention it, but we talked about it a little before. Things like the Sherpa.
The Sherpa, which is a Russian-built, literally like this tank of a vehicle.
Yeah. Military vehicles, you can get like old military vehicles recommissioned, or just like an RV, like a proper camper trailer, or like the redone vans, like the A-Team type thing where you put some beds in them and stuff. All these things are great ways to get out there. So if you basically, in the end though, I don't care if it can move a person, it can get you into woods camping somehow, some way.
And for sure. And the beauty of any of it is you can grow with it. You know what I mean? Just because you start out with one thing, maybe you'll want to go somewhere else with it. You know what I mean? You can start on a bicycle, and a lot of people do. And you can end up with potentially an ultralight helicopter. You know what I mean? The sky is the limit. But where you are going, how you are getting there, who you're going with, this is all going to guide your journey. And I mean, for a lot of people, this episode, I can already hear, the eyes rolling in the back of their head. Oh, these guys are just talking about what everybody already knows. It's not that we don't expect you folks to know this stuff. It's just a little bit more insight if you had questions about some of it.
Or maybe something you maybe just didn't think of. Because I see some people, this is the thing, people who aren't into, those of us who are already doing it, yes, we've probably thought all these things. But occasionally you end up with a person who's never done it, never gotten out there and go, oh, I can't do it. I just have this. Well, I have seen people do some pretty amazing camping trips in a Honda Civic. I have seen people do some pretty amazing camping trips on a regular bicycle. They just got, we talked about him. Alan, I won't give his last name, but a huge contributor to some of the early bushcraft things. He had the pedal bicycle with the little motor on it.
Yeah, the little two-stroke engines on them.
Yeah, little two-stroke mopeds or whatever you want to call them. And he was going all over the place. I mean, that's an awesome little option. You can buy those little engines for I think about $150 on Amazon, maybe a little more, maybe a little less. You attach them to almost any bicycle, and if I remember, it takes like 5 liters of gas, and you can go like 120 kilometers.
Oh, man, they got outrageous fuel mileage on these things, and these things are great, to be honest with you. Depending on where you are is depending on how they're classified. I guess, seeing we're talking about them, I'll touch on them. In Nova Scotia, 50 cc's and under, it is a motor-assisted pedal bike. 50 cc's and over, it is a pedal-assisted motorcycle. So a moped, technically, and do with what you want with that information. But they're super easy to build. Literally, a buddy of mine, we made one for him. We had never seen one of these things other than what Alan, I'd seen his, sent pictures, because I had talked about them then. But anyway, my buddy Marcus wanted one of these things. He bought the kit, bought a bike off the side of the road for $10, and we threw this thing together in like 3 hours and a case of beer. So... It's not difficult, and it worked great for a big guy like me. I'm almost 300 pounds now. At the time, I was probably around 270 something or other. Me on this thing was doing 55 kilometers an hour. Like, that's cooking on a pedal bike. For somebody like me, it is anyway.
I just double check that. I was looking at them on Amazon not too long ago. Yeah, so you can buy a whole kit for $150.
Yeah, they're not much money, and a lot of the kits are very similar to a certain point. Like in a certain price range there, and I'll let you folks do your own kind of research on this. They're all fairly similar. All the parts are fairly similar. I know I took parts off a different brand one and put on another branded one because Marcus ran a tank of straight gas through it instead of mixing it. Scorched the piston, all the heck. And yeah, the parts just transferred and it was all good. They were actually way more impressive than I had thought they were going to be.
I've never owned one. I've played with them. I helped repair a couple. But I've seen a couple of teenagers driving around with one time, and they were having a blast. And like, I'm sure some people looked at them and called them hooligans, but the reality is here's somebody with 13, 14 years old with a beat-up looking old bicycle and these little motors on it, and I'm sure they had a blast. Throw an old backpack on and put a couple of fishing rods in there and a couple of snacks, and man, I can picture me as a kid having one of those. It would have been a blast. I would have gone miles and miles, you know? And the beauty is you can shut the motor off and go quietly through town. Once you get out there, just like have a blast. So yeah, I mean, think about it. Like if these are some options. You can get out there, get the places. The big advantage is it gets you a little bit further. It'll get you where your feet wouldn't have because of time and space. The end result, you need to be able to get out there. I've watched people explore the wilderness in wheelchairs. I've seen people explore the wilderness in many, many ways. So, if you have a will, there's a way. You may not be able to do exactly what you want, but you can get out there and do something extremely amazing.
I agree. And I think that's probably just as good a place as any to end this tonight, unless you had more you want to say on any of this, Ben.
I will refrain from saying more. We didn't need to end it. But yeah, no.
Chris, great point, Chris. We didn't explain or discuss the most important vehicle, your feet. And seeing anybody that stuck around for the hour and 11 minutes, the feet is where we all start. At some point, we learn to crawl, then walk, and then our adventures start from there. So your feet will never let you down, providing you can still, have the full function of your feet and whatnot. And if you don't, as Ben said, we have seen people go in the woods in wheelchairs and crutches with prosthetics. The only limiting factor is literally anything that's going on up here.
But generally, all these things are just an enhancement to your feet. Like, you walk to that vehicle and you're generally going to get there and you're going to walk around your site. Now, if you can't walk, that doesn't mean I growing up, there was a young guy in my class. He didn't live to an old age, but he got a little electric wheelchair, and he was excited because it was allow him to go down like ATV trails and stuff, and he took it places. He went down and seen streams and stuff that he never thought he would be able to ever see again unless somebody put him on a motorized vehicle to get there. He was pretty excited about that. Can he do 100% everyone else can? No, but he can get to pretty amazing places. So, yeah. So, yeah, get out there. Have fun. There is no excuse not to go.
None whatsoever. Night, everybody.